Good morning. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar on Indian pharma market growth outlook for the year 2022. First of all, I would really thank you for sparing your time on a Tuesday morning, especially this week, because it's the busiest part of our week wherein we are busy in doing our monthly closings. But I'm sure you will find this session very useful because we have tried to build in certain methodologies wherein we can look into how the future of the pharma industry would be in the coming year. That's in the next 12 months, starting from Jan to December 2022. We're not looking at too much long term, but only in this 1 year, how the market would perform based on its performance in the historical way, the disruption seen due to COVID, and if I were to take care or assume that COVID is almost over today, how would the market behave in the next 1 year? So, the content of today's presentation, yeah. So we actually have divided the presentation into four parts. One is the impact of COVID on the normal IPM trend lines. What is the extent of disruption that COVID had in the IPM? If COVID had not happened, then how would the IPM have behaved? So we are looking at the IPM behavior with and without COVID impact. And based on these 2 points, we have worked at an approach towards deriving the IPM growth outlook for the year 2022. And then we come out with actual numbers for the IPM growth outlook for the year 2022. Now, this entire discussion that we would be having, we would be focusing on the approach. Why do we say that this is how a particular therapy would behave, or this is how the trends would look like? Now, this is entirely based on certain assumptions and some study of the trend lines that we have seen in the past, and some likely events that may happen in the future. It is possible that there might be some disruption that may happen in the market, or the market may not exactly behave in this particular way. But this analysis at least helps us and gives us a direction of how the market could behave. Or if I were to dig deeper and do some specific study for my particular therapy, this gives me a direction on how I can do a analysis on my particular therapy of interest. In today's presentation, we have not focused on all the therapies, but we have focused majorly on the top 10 therapies in the IPM, which are the major contributors, and majority of the players in the IPM today focus on these top 10 therapies only. So we have focused majorly on these top therapies, and we would be doing analysis on these therapies only. So to start with, we will look at the impact of COVID on the normal IPM trend lines. So IPM, so what we have done is we have done a study of the IPM trend line for the last 4 years, or rather the last 5 years. So we have looked at the IPM trend from 2016, 17, 18, and 19, how the IPM has behaved. So if you see, our Indian industry is composed of acute as well as chronic therapies, and both of the therapies show different trend lines. They show different patterns of peaks and troughs in the IPM market. While chronic segment does not show a significant seasonality sales, they don't have a seasonality pattern, because chronic therapy would include drugs like hypertension or cardiac drugs, diabetes drugs, which do not depend upon a season. Monsoon, winter, summer does not impact consumption of diabetes or cardiac products. So they really don't show a significant seasonality in sales pattern. Whereas if you look at the acute therapy, it is highly dependent on seasonal disease trends. So acute therapy, I would put drugs like respiratory, which is the cough and cold segment, or antifungal segment, or I would say a gastro segment, which becomes more prominent in terms of unit consumption in the monsoon season, or I would say the emollients, which become more prominent in terms of consumption during the winter season. Now, this acute segment is something which definitely shows a seasonal trend. Looking at the climatic conditions or the seasons that India has today, we have seen typically in the second half, that is from the month of July to December. These are the 6 months in which the IPM usually picks up. If you see traditionally over all the years, Jan to June, the growth is relatively steady. And majority of the Q2 growth, that majority of the annual growth or pickup that has to happen in the IPM actually starts happening from the month of July onwards, because monsoon, winter, these are the seasons where acute therapy ailments increase. And in India, in majority of the states of this country, July to December is the season, or June to December is the season where monsoon, winter, and the diseases which are attached to these seasons are more prominent across. Then we will be looking at what happened in 2020. In 2020, if you see this normal trend line, we saw a major disruption. In fact, if you look from the month of January, February, March, where things were still normal, we realized that there is no major disruption as such. It was, business as usual. But 15th March or somewhere around mid-March was the time when lockdown was announced. And that actually brought down the sales. Significant downward aberration in the sales was seen in the month of April and May. Now, why did this happen? If you see, actually, procurement, production, distribution, and promotion, these were the multifaceted challenges that the IPM faced. Again, it's like coupled with this, there was also a problem of patients going out of the house and getting consultation from doctors. So while it was a challenge for the Indian pharma industry, for the medical rep to go and meet the doctor, but then another challenge was also for the patient to go and meet the doctor. While the bigger pharma players still managed to survive in this scenario, it was the smaller players who faced the brunt. Because if you see, typically the Indian pharma industry is a branded generics industry, and the margins that one gets from this branded generics business are relatively lower. Now, the extent of margin may vary from therapy to therapy, but relatively the margins are lower. So, stacking a good amount of raw material is a concern for many players, or stacking a good amount of produced goods inventory is also a concern. While procurement and production is a concern, inventory was also a concern, and also the distribution. How do we take these goods? Even if I have the goods ready, how do I take them to the market? So basically, while the bigger pharma players had the might to still manage these challenges, it was the smaller players who faced the brunt of the unexpected market events. If you see, COVID peak of wave one in terms of absolute number of cases, daily absolute number of daily cases, the peak of wave one was somewhere in the month of September. But did you see how the IPM behaved? The IPM did not show a dip in the month of September. The IPM actually started going on a recovery phase from the month of June onwards. Okay, now this recovery, then I can put a caveat, it's not the normal disease pattern drugs which started a pickup. It is possible that drugs like favipiravir, remdesivir, or drugs which had a role to play in the treatment of COVID, they were the ones which started driving the growth of the market. But net, if I were to see from a absolutely top level, bird's eye view, then I would say that the IPM actually started going towards a normal trend somewhere from the month of June, July onwards. Okay, so this is telling that gradually it was picking up, still with a caveat that the major contribution was from the drugs which were there for or needed for the treatment of COVID. Then what happened in 2021? Just the way we saw, 2020 saw a dip in sales or an aberration in the downward direction. 2021 saw an aberration in the upward direction. Okay. Now, why do I say that this aberration in the upward direction is good enough? Because we need to have some conclusions based on this aberration. COVID wave 2 was much more stronger than wave 1, which arrived in the month of February. The number of cases seen in, or daily cases seen in the peak of wave 2 were much higher than the ones which were seen in the peak of wave 1. However, if you see, this did not impact, or this did not give this downward traction to the IPM. Wave 2 came somewhere in the month of February. We did face certain challenges of meeting the demands of certain products, because the number of cases started increasing abruptly. However, this meeting of demand was taken care of quite quickly because government came into action. Pharma companies had actually boosted their production. All these problems of procurement, production, distribution, promotion, which the big and small players both faced, small players to a greater extent. In the period post COVID wave one, many of the companies actually pulled their socks up and made themselves ready for all these challenges. And this readiness has helped them in the long term, not just in the COVID period. So what has happened is all this, the companies were ready in this period of time, and this coupled with a spurt in demand for certain medications actually brought up the growth of the market to a good extent. So in fact, by this time, peak of wave two, government came into action very aggressively, and there were certain goods which had to be supplied to the government directly without intervention from the stockist. AWACS data typically captures all the drugs that are moving from the stockist to the retailer. So probably this trend line does not capture the component which the government has procured directly. So that is not there as a part of this trend. Okay. Now these aberrations in the IPM sales. Now what we look next is how did these aberrations impact the growth drivers of the IPM. So we looked at the monthly growth drivers of the IPM. This was the period when lockdown was announced. The entire growth was a negative volume driven, whereas value and price were on positive. It was the volumes which was bringing down the growth of the market. Peak of wave two, growth drivers were steady, still stable. Though the number of cases increased significantly, the growth trends were still better. Peak of wave, that is peak of wave one. In case of wave two, what happened is companies were ready, demand was very high. So the demand for goods was very high, and we were ready with the supply as well. As peak two subsided, we see that the growth drivers started getting normalized. Still, we see a good amount of double-digit growth over here because there was a significant negative growth at this point of time. So this double-digit growth was a result of two things. One is correction of the dip, which was seen due to the announcement of sudden lockdown, as well as normalization of the disease pattern. Where do we stand in terms of disease December data? To a great extent, a stable 5.3% growth. Now, this was essential. Okay, before even going to the extrapolation part, just one last aspect that we need to look at the market data for the month of December and for the March December. So if you look what we have done, in fact, we keep on discussing every time drugs with COVID influence and drugs without COVID influence. So I will not go too much in detail, but drugs with COVID influence are these categories of drugs across the different therapy areas which had a role to play in COVID treatment, whether it was direct treatment or indirect treatment, in the sense prophylactic purpose of management of complications or management of opportunity infections that may occur. So overall, for the entire year, the growth of the market was 15%, but the COVID influence drugs, which contribute to around 37% of the IPM, they had grown by 27%, whereas the other section growth has shown a growth of around 9%. For the month of December, the growth of the overall IPM has come down. But at the same time, if you see, there is a good balance of growth between the COVID influence and the non-COVID influence drugs. So for the month of December, the growth may look low, but then I definitely see a good amount of balance. Now, even this growth of COVID influence drugs that I'm seeing today, to a great extent, it is not meant for treatment of COVID or COVID related complications, but to a great extent, this category of drugs also has some demand as per the normal disease patterns. For example, anti-infectives or cough and cold preparations. Otherwise, even if COVID had not occurred, they would have shown some amount of sale. And it is because of that impact that I am seeing this type of growth in the market today. Now, even before going to, how would the market look in the next year, we really need to look at what were the trend lines of the market before COVID times. So what we have done is we have actually plotted the trend of the market from Jan 2019 onwards to December 2021. So last 3 years, of which I would consider Jan December as a period where there was absolutely no impact of COVID as such. It was a normal, healthy year that the IPM would otherwise show. So if I were to just look at the trend lines, in this year, the non-COVID impact year itself, you would see that from the month of June or July to the month of December, the sales of IPM usually peaks. Okay. And Here is the time where the disruption one or a downward major aberration was seen, and here is the time where an upward major aberration was seen. COVID wave 2 actually subsided, and by the month of June, July, the number of cases came down significantly. But then, if you look, the normal upward trend which the IPM shows from the month of July onwards is something which the IPM has shown. Possible that still the component of COVID influenced drugs is on a slightly higher side. But then, as the COVID wave subsided, the market has started going back, showing its normal trend lines. Now, as we say, this is a seasonal pattern. Probably chronic therapies like cardio may not show that type of seasonality. Then we try to look at certain seasonal products, seasonal therapies. How did those seasonal therapies with a seasonal dependence, how did they behave, or how are they behaving post wave 2 subsiding? Majority of the therapies like anti-infectives, I have just taken 4 therapies which show a seasonal trend, 3 therapies which show a seasonal trend, and 1 therapy which really doesn't show that type of seasonal trend as examples. If you see anti-infectives, pain, respiratory, these are the categories which show a seasonal trend wherein the season is somewhere from the month of June to December. True to their seasonal pattern trend lines, these therapies actually showed that type of peak in the second half of 2021. We see it for anti-infective segment, we see it for respiratory segment, we see it for pain analgesic segment. So these are big therapies. They contribute significantly to the IPM today. And these big therapies have now started going and showing its normal disease pattern. Now it's a different thing that over last year they had dipped significantly, and there is a correction as well. Nutritionals category, actually, if you see in the past years, it was showing a steady trend, but only in the COVID times because of the hype, okay, because of the hype of that immunomodulator, immunoprotector properties, that the sales actually jumped up in the month of in the first wave, COVID first wave, and it jumped up even further in the COVID second wave. Now that things are normal, and in these 2 periods, now you need to remember that we were not vaccinated, or vaccination had just started for healthcare workers and senior citizens at that point of time, or people with comorbid conditions like diabetes or cardiac conditions. However, at this point of time, all of us are vaccinated. Almost 70% of the India's population is actually vaccinated with 2 doses. A booster dose has already been started for healthcare workers, senior citizen patients, and also for people with comorbid conditions. So, somewhere that panic or fear of, I need to boost my immunity by taking multivitamins, that panic doesn't exist anymore. Even I would say many of us would have got impacted or would have gone through a COVID infection post vaccination as well. But all of us realize, even I have gone through it, all of us realize that the symptoms are not that severe, and a care taken in 2 3 days actually helps me in good recovery. So that's the reason why probably the multivitamins section, which had that high demand in some period of time during the COVID times, probably that craze is dying down. Again, these are trend lines that I'm studying. I'm not making any, a strong prediction. I'm studying the trend lines, I'm looking at market events, and I'm making certain statements. It is possible that these statements may not prove to be right all times, but then if I have to think how the market is going to behave, I need to have some background, I need to have some assumptions, and I also need to study some market events that have occurred and that may occur in the future. So that was the first part where we looked at the impact of COVID on the normal IPM trend lines. Now we look at IPM with and without COVID impact. Okay. So if you look at the normal trend line, here I have taken actually a longer time frame. I have plotted the timelines from Jan 16 to December 21. So if you look, otherwise, before COVID times, IPM actually was following a very nice and steady trend line. It is only in this year, April 2020, that the IPM showed a major downward shift. April 20 sale, monthly sale that IPM has shown is actually equal to September 16 monthly sale that IPM has shown. So actually, this was one period where we went back 4 years. Average monthly sale where it used to be 12,000 in this year, we went back to, our earlier years, 4 years back, we were showing a monthly sale of 10,000. Second aberration that we saw is, 15,000 crore monthly sale. IPM has never seen this type of sale, and not in the next 1 or 2 years are we going to see this type of monthly sale. So if we are under the assumption that, we reached a rosy picture at that point of time and again we are going to reach there, that may not really be happening. Today, this probably we have taken care of this downward and upward aberrations, and we are probably following the normal disease pattern, because I keep on telling that we have normalized, most of the therapies are following their disease patterns, and now probably we are going to follow the same monthly trend that we were following in the past. Now what we have done is, this is our normal trend line, okay, which we are seeing. What we have also tried to do is, we have plotted a trend line wherein we have made certain assumptions that what if COVID did not come into picture. So for that, what we have done is, we have taken the sales only till the month of December 2019, and taking into care this monthly trend line, we have tried to plot the sales for the next 2 years. So I'm assuming that COVID did not occur at all. Then how would have IPM behaved? Now this is a blue line. If you see, the blue line completely superimposes over the brown line till December 2019. Reason is, it's the same numbers. Okay, I have taken the market up to the same numbers. But where the bifurcation or where the change happens is from COVID years. Had COVID not occurred, probably in the month of April, where I have ended up showing a sale of 10,000 crores, I would have ended up showing a sale of around 20,000, 12,000 crores. In the month of April 21, where I ended up showing a sale of 15,600 crores, I would have ended up showing a sale of around 13,000 crores. Now over here, it's just an extrapolation. So, you should just spare, because you just focus on the thought process. Don't go into, I'm seeing these ups and downs over here. Just focus on the thought process of, what is it that would have happened in the market if COVID had not happened. Okay. So basically, if you see, if COVID was not there in April 21, we would have shown a sale of around 13,000 crores. Today, if you see, this was the point from where these two lines started separating. So this was a code. Brown line is showing me how COVID has had disrupted the IPM. Whereas the blue line is telling me, if the disruption would not have happened, this is how IPM would have behaved. Then what I am seeing is, today in the month of December, the brown number is actually the number which the IPM has shown, and the blue number is the number which I have arrived at the IPM after doing extrapolation. If you see, to a great extent, both the numbers match. This gives me a first indication that probably that COVID fear, or that COVID impact is probably over. Okay. So next step. Now we looked at, COVID, this downward aberration has taken us back to 4 years, September 16th. Now this upward aberration, because what happens, the moment we see a market going up, we become very optimistic. Array, this month we showed this much sale, not for the anti-infective, but any other therapy, and we expect this sale or this performance to get repeated over a period of time. That may not be happening, because it was the period of time where the demand increased. That demand is not going to stay forever. Okay. So what we did in the next picture is, if you see in the previous one, 15,000 crore or 15,600 crore was the monthly sale which IPM has shown in April 2021. If I had to extrapolate this line further, when would I see this type of sale? In February 24. Okay, if the IPM had followed a normal trend line, then 15,600 crore IPM monthly sale is something which we would have witnessed almost in February 24th, or first half of 2024. So this sale, which was supposed to come after 3 years, had got preponed to April 21. So that's the reason why we need to keep all these factors in mind when we are extrapolating the growth of the market. So when we are extrapolating the growth of the market, I should not just look at the growth numbers, array 2% growth, 5% growth, minus 10% growth. No, we should not look at those numbers, but we should look at the value trend. How much incremental is the value over 2019 or 2020 or 2021? Though, typically because for our performance measures, or, to show how much will be my internal growth versus market growth, I may focus on the growth figure, but then growth is not everything. I should look at the incremental. I should look at the alignment of the therapy trend with the normal trend in normal circumstances where I would be. So what we are now, we are going to the main section where we focus on our approach towards deriving the IPM growth outlook for the year 2020. So we have followed a five-step approach for arriving at this. Step number one is we studied the trend lines for the key therapy areas from 2016 to 2021. After that, we segregated the two periods. We segregated 2020 to 21 as a COVID period and 2016 and to 19 as non-COVID period. Then we extrapolated the IPM trend excluding the COVID years. So, I need to see that if COVID did not exist, how would it be? Because in COVID period, there are many of the therapies which caused the disruption. Favipiravir, remdesivir, posaconazole, voriconazole, then excessive consumption of dexamethasone, prednisolone, injectable insulins, the pickup being too high, which never will happen ever in the post-COVID times, or even certain drugs which were like meant for taking care of clotting, cardiac complications like enoxaparin, which has been there in the market for so many years, but all of a sudden it has shown a 200% growth. So those disruptions will not exist. I mean, that's an assumption that wave three is not going to be that severe, and those disruptions will not exist. So if I need to remove all those disruptions, if I were to say that now it's going to be a normal time, so we have assumed that the normal population growth, the way the population used to grow, that would be in a normal way. The prevalence and incidence of diseases would go back to their normal pattern, and the diseases also would be as per the normal patterns. Now, based on this, we arrive at three. We have tried to extrapolate the market in three ways. One is we looked at a bigger chunk of period. One is we looked at MAT 16, 17, 18 data. So we looked at uh, four MAT data. So we just considered 4 years as time periods, and we applied a statistical formula to arrive at the extrapolation. We also tried to look at if the linear trend line which we get is a smooth linear trend line and is in line with the older trends. Second is we try to become little more granular. Instead of extrapolating on 4 MAT periods, we extrapolated on the last 48 months. So basically, Jan 16 to December 16, it took all the months for extrapolation, and we checked for a smoother trend line. And third is we actually look at the 4-year CAGR of the different therapies to arrive at the non-COVID impact. And we just applied that CAGR for, as a growth for the 2020, 2021 and 2022 period. And we checked for a smoother trend line. So it was essential for us to look at all the three scenarios to see where do we reach. It is possible that the scenario one is slightly different, scenario two is slightly different. It may actually vary from therapy area to therapy area. It may actually also vary from different molecules or different sub-supergroups within a therapy area. That is also possible. But then we are trying to understand at a top level, where do we reach? Because we need to put some methodology in place. Then we did the next part is, if this is the sale, how would that sale actually span out on monthly basis? So we calculated the monthly contribution of annual sales in the non-COVID period. For example, if the sale was 100 rupees, how much happened in the month of Jan, Feb, March, April, May in the non-COVID period? This pattern to a great extent repeats every year in the non-COVID times. It is only in the COVID times that certain drugs showed unusual high consumption in those COVID months. And then we arrived at an average that, in the 16, 17, 18, 19, we calculated the average trend. And then we arrived at this should be the contribution for the next year, or the current year 2022. And then we applied this average monthly contribution to the extrapolated value. Now, what I will do is I will just take one example of one therapy of how this has been done. I will just use the anti-diabetic therapy. Okay, so in anti-diabetic therapy, the first step is study the trend lines for the key therapies from 2016 to 21 and then segregation. So this is how the picture looks for the anti-diabetes therapy. What we have done is for 2016, this has been the value trend for the COVID drugs. In anti-diabetes therapy, the COVID drugs would be majorly the insulin section, and the non-COVID drugs would be majorly the OADs, other OADs, whether it is S2 plus med or the gliptins. All the OADs come in the non-COVID drugs. So this, the ones which are marked in white color are the ones, the value trends in the non-COVID period. And the ones which are marked in pink color are the COVID years. I've written over here COVID years. And this is how actually, this is how the real impact of the market. So this is live sales from live sales. This is actual sales as captured, actual secondary sales as captured in our AWACS data. How was the growth impacted? If you see, traditionally the market was growing by 14%, 13%, 13%. But then in COVID times, the market growth came down to 8% and 6%. When we talk, now there may be various reasons why this happened. One is what we have seen is the patient footfall went down. People, in fact, diabetes patients were the ones who were more careful. And we have also seen that the prescription habits did not change. The patients continued taking the same drugs that they were taking in the past. So new patients were also not put on the therapy protocol did not change. So more or less the patient footfall was slightly on a lower side. This was the step one of first of all studying the trend lines and segregating the market into the COVID years and non-COVID years. While COVID years showed a relatively healthy growth, in the non-COVID years, the growth had fallen back. Then we extrapolated the IPM trend excluding the COVID years. We used three ways, okay? One is using MAT trend, one is using month trend, and one is using 4-year CAGR. To arrive at, if the COVID did not occur in 2020 and 2021, how would the market have looked for 2020, 21, and 22? So this is how the picture looks. So extrapolation without COVID years, where we have considered only 4 MATs. If I would consider only this as the normal trend line, then this is how the market would have looked at. And the anti-diabetic therapy would have ended at this year somewhere around 18,000 crores. Somewhere I would just round it off at 18,000 crores. If I were to take a monthly trend, which would be relatively more granular, probably a little more accurate, then I would still have ended at around 18,000 crores. And if I had taken a CAGR of 2016, 17, 18, and 19, and then arrived at a market, I would have still ended this year at a 18,000 crore. So what I try to do is I try to apply multiple ways in approaching the market trend. So I really need to, because the therapy trends may vary from therapy to therapy, but I need to check or ensure that at least the modules that I'm using in all possible ways, they at least are somewhere close. They should not go completely haywire. Okay. So somewhere, and we also try to draw a linear trend line. So with this methodology, if the overall anti-diabetic value till here, okay, this was the linear trend line for the anti-diabetic market from 2016 to 2019. Does my extrapolation bring this in line? Yes. The line is a very nice and smooth trend line. The line seems to be a smooth linear trend line whether I use method 1, method 2, or method 3. This somewhere gives me a confidence that probably yes, I am on the right track. Then what we did is we calculated the monthly contribution of annual sales in the non-COVID period. So this is how the market looked. Okay, if it was 100% sale, I will just focus on the last for the anti-diabetes therapy on the overall market. Okay, because we have done this thing for COVID and non-COVID. If you see, okay, still I will take you through the COVID section. Now COVID will be majorly your insulins. So if you see those insulins, on an average, this is a sale. If you see, since it is a chronic therapy, more or less, monthly sale is around 7 to 8%, not more. But then if you see this period, okay, this is the peak of wave 2, where there were a lot of hospitalizations, people who were suffering with comorbid conditions like diabetes They had to be given prednisolone, dexamethasone for controlling their breathlessness problems. And since they were already the dose given was not titrated and titrated well, and since they were already suffering from conditions like diabetes, their glucose levels went haywire, because of which they had to be given injectable insulins. And that is the reason why in the month of April and May, the insulin sale picked up. Will this phenomena continue? Not really now, because this was not given as a chronic therapy, it was given as an acute therapy. So till the time they were hospitalized, and probably 10, 15 days after they were discharged from the hospital. After that they were off the therapy. Okay. So even if you look at for non-COVID drugs also, more or less, non-COVID drugs, the normal OAD market, you will see overall 7 to 8% is a monthly contribution that one sees. So what we have done is, we have then thought about, what we have worked out is, this is what happened in COVID times. If it are not COVID times, then what would have been the contribution? So what we have done is, we have just taken the average of this contribution and applied to the monthly sales that we get. So we have already extrapolated over here what would be the sales over here. And to this sale, we have applied average of monthly contribution to that monthly annual sales. So after we apply the average monthly contribution of non-COVID sales to the extrapolated value, this is what we arrive at. So basically we have extrapolation without the COVID years using the yearly data, that is the MAT data for extrapolation, extrapolation without COVID years using the monthly data, and extrapolation by using the 4-year CAGR. So if I apply all these calculations, I would just focus on the total, that is the total anti-diabetic category. Overall, the anti-diabetic category in the pre-COVID years was showing a growth of around 14, 13%, which dipped. And what we are seeing is, going forward, the growth would be a double digit. So anti-diabetic category is expected to grow by double digit. Again, it may happen that it may grow by single digit also. But then, as I said, I would request you to focus on the approach and methodology that we have looked into. Anti-diabetic category has also drugs like DAPA losing patent, Sita may lose patent. But then one should remember that as the drugs lose patent, it is the number of units which grow probably a little better than the absolute value. As the drugs lose patent, the price or the value comes down significantly. So net, the value more or less, there is a slight increase in value, though the units increase significantly. So anti-diabetes would be one category where there may be an impact of certain patent losses. So DAPA may start showing up, start picking up. But net, if I look at a bigger picture, the category may grow at a double digit. Now this is how we have worked for the uh, top therapies. What I had done is, I have just put it on a PPT, but what I will do is for uh, just a minute, I will share another screen where we have converted all of this into a dashboard. Okay. So in this dashboard, if you see, we have worked only on the top 10 therapies. We have not focused on all the therapies. Also, it would be incorrect to just remove this filter and look at the growth of IPM. No, that is not how it is going to happen. Okay, here we are trying to study each therapy in detail. It is possible that if I were to do analysis for my therapy, probably I need to dig a little deeper. I need to do a little deeper understanding and study of the therapies. But what we have tried to do is, we have tried to work on a direction. After anti-diabetes, probably I look into the anti-infective therapy. In case of anti-infective therapy, typically, uh, anti-infective therapy, again, if you look at the three ways in which we try to do the extrapolation, keeping the MAT data and arriving at the, extrapolating on the MAT data, the market seems to be somewhere around the 18,000, sorry, it's yeah, for the anti-infectious therapy, for keeping only MAT data, the market would be somewhere around 21,000 crores, 21,400. Here it would be around 22,000 crores. And by applying the CAGR, the market would be around 21,000 crores. So using the three methodologies, we realized that the market would end up somewhere between 21 to 22,000 crores. Now, once we have arrived at this, we look at the linear trend as well. The linear trends, if you see, the older linear trend, that there's a quite a smooth trend line that we are seeing in the market. If I were to look at the monthly contribution of the anti-infective segment over here, what we realize it is these COVID drugs whose monthly contribution went up significantly. Now, these COVID drugs, this is not the scenario that we are going to see now. Okay, the scenario is going to change significantly. Overall, if you look at the anti-infectives, overall the anti-infective segment, the consumption had actually gone haywire somewhere in the month of April and May, where we have shown as against the normal consumption or normal distribution of 8% contribution of these months, the contribution went to around 11%. Also, the contributors to this hike would be majorly COVID drugs like favipiravir, remdesivir. Certain hospital anti-infectives also would have picked up because there was a lot of hospitalization. But then gradually, over a period of time, this is going to come down. In fact, in the year 2021 itself, in 2020, again, there was a little aberration, but in 2021 itself, we are seeing a normalization of the trend that is happening in the second half. Now, if now here what we have done is we have tried to average out. If 8% has been the contribution in the pre-COVID times, sometimes the contribution may be, see over here, it may be 7%, sometimes it may be 8%, sometimes it may be 7%. So we just try to average out this number. And if I were to average out this number, what would be the contribution to the sales? And if this is the average number that I'm seeing, you see, typically anti-infectives is a seasonal category. The monsoon seasons, which start from June, July, August, September, October, or July to December, these are the times where we see a peak consumption of the anti-infectives. We expect this thing pattern to be repeated over here, and we applied this contribution of sales. Now, I will not go when I look at each and every therapy, I will not explain this. I may explain for certain key therapies, but then this is more or less how we arrive at the contribution on a monthly basis. And then based on this, now what we are seeing is anti-infectives. In fact, the COVID anti-infectives, which were, actually they were degrowing at some point of time, showed some growth. In 2020, they were degrowing, and in 2021, a major boost in growth was seen. Again, this is completely COVID-driven growth to a great extent, which is not going to exist. The market is going to come down, and they may actually end up showing some sort of decline. Coming to the overall anti-infective segment, if you see, the anti-infective segment has shown a bumper growth of 25% in 2021. How was the growth for the anti-infective segment in the earlier years, 16, 17, 18, 19? In fact, in 17, the segment has degrown, a slight growth. So do we expect this type of 25% growth to exist? Not really. But then I should not focus on the degrowth piece. As I keep on telling you, don't focus on the degrowth part, but you focus on the increment. If you see 16 crore, 16,000 crore, 16,000 crore, 17,000 crore, 19,000 crore, the market, if I even were to apply a 1,000, 2,000 crore, still, it would end up somewhere at around 22,000 crore. I am not saying that my number of -6% may be a perfect number, but the direction that I'm giving is anti-infectives market is not going to show this type of robust growth or 25% robust growth. In fact, somewhere we should be accepting that the growth is going to come down significantly. It may not be -6%, it may be -2%, it may be 0%, but then I should not ride on a robust wave that, I'm going to show a 12% growth in the anti-infective segment. For my individual category, probably the molecules in which I exist, I may need to apply this approach at a granular level. I have applied this approach at a top level. For as the companies start working on this at their individual level, they need to apply this approach at a granular level. Look at certain market events that may happen in your particular molecule and take it forward. Then this was about the anti-infective therapy. Next, we come to the cardiac therapy. Even in case of cardiac therapy, it was mainly the enoxaparin or the high-end heparins anti-infectives. They were the ones which majorly have driven the growth in the COVID times. This growth is going to come down drastically. Even the non-COVID drugs, actually the growth was never so high, never so double-digit. Only in the 2019, there was a double-digit growth. In case of cardiac therapy also, if you see, there are no major blockbusters coming in the market. Also, and if one looks at the prescription habits or prescription trends, they are still down as far as the cardiac therapy is concerned. I'm not predicting that the market is going to absolutely stagnate and show a 0% growth, but then I do not expect a very healthy, or very healthy double-digit growth. Again, many a times we do a mistake of focusing only on growth part of the market. What we also need to focus is on the incremental part. So, market in 2019 was a 17,000 crore market. Now, with all the challenges of patients being more careful about their health conditions and lower patient footfall, or lower detection of cardiac conditions, despite all that challenges, as life normalizes, will from on 17,000 crore against a 17,000 crore turnover for the cardiac segment in 2019, we are going to end up somewhere at around 21,000 crore, which is itself a good and healthy picture. So I may not feel bad that it's going to grow only by 0%, but I need to look at the positive picture that over 17,000 crore, it's going to be incremental of around 4,000 crore. We need to look at that positive picture. I will not go on linear trends because everywhere I have actually checked the linear trends and the linear trends are matching, and that's the reason why I have arrived at that number. Coming to the derma segment was one segment where it actually has shown or suffered significantly both the COVID drugs and non-COVID drugs. As far as the COVID drugs is concerned, there was hardly anything. It was just those sanitizers or COVID on iodine sanitizers which fell in the derma segment, which had hardly any sale in the first wave, but in the second wave, it showed a significant growth. We expect that this, in fact, traditionally, this segment was showing a double-digit growth. So that segment would revive. Also, in terms of 2000 non-COVID drugs, in case of derma segment, the majority of the section which was getting or which was suffering was the segment like hair restorers or cosmetics like sunscreens, all those segments which wherein a demand went down because people were working from home. That demand gradually started picking up in 2021. In fact, now from this week, where even the pre-primary schools are opening up, we expect the derma segment to boost pretty well in the coming year. And that's the reason why if you look at the growth that we are looking at the derma segment, we're looking at a good double-digit growth from the derma segment, because somewhere people have started moving out. Again, as I keep on talking that, don't look at growth only as the parameter, look at the increment. So against a 9,600 turnover in 2019, we expect a turnover of close to 12,200 crore, which is in line with a normal linear trend line, which the derma segment has been showing. If I were to look at the gastro segment, now this segment, if you see, the segment has shown a robust growth in 2021, and this growth was a sudden growth. Okay, especially it was driven more in the COVID wave 2. In wave 1, we did not see this type of growth. So that's the reason why it's like, if you see typically even the gastro segment in pre-COVID years, it had never shown this type of double-digit growth. It was hovering somewhere between 5% to 8%, not beyond that. The growth for the gastro segment is expected to come down, not confirmatory telling that it is going to be negative, but it is definitely not going to be 21%, 10%, or 8%. It is definitely going to be lower than that. However, if I were to look at the positive picture, we were at 14,000 crore in 18, 15,000 crore in 2019, and we are expecting a 3,000 crore incremental at least in 2020, which is again in line with the linear trend. If this COVID aberration had not occurred, this is how the market would have definitely. Coming to the gynac segment again, if you see in the gynac segment, we are seeing a growth of around 3%, 3%, and 2%. Gynac segment had never seen this type of double-digit growth, but this growth actually picked up in 2021. So it would be basically normalization of the growth that we look in the gynac segment. As far as the neuro CNS segment is concerned, in the neuro CNS segment, typically the segment which was at a single-digit growth in 2017, 18, 19, but growth actually went up significantly in 2021. That is going to come down. It's going to slow down. It may not actually be but it is not going to be 10%. So it will be somewhere around 5-6%. Even if I say that 3% doesn't look to be the right number, 10% is definitely not going to happen. And these predictions or these extrapolations are based on certain assumptions of the market. We will definitely have to wait for the period from Jan to December to understand how the market is going to behave over a period of time. Coming to the pain and analgesic segment, again, if you see, this segment actually showed a boost in sales in the second wave. In first wave, this segment actually suffered heavily. This segment has shown a degrowth of 3%, whereas in the second wave, it has shown a growth of close to 23%. This segment will not definitely grow to that extent of 23%, but then there will be a lot of correction happening. A single digit growth, not 1%, but at least not a 10% or 8% growth that this market would be showing in 2020. As far as the respiratory segment is concerned, again, same picture was seen in the respiratory segment. Here in 2020, the growth tanked, it suffered significantly, but in 2021, it actually went up significantly. Respiratory segment in 2021, those bronchodilators, cough and cold preparations, they picked up even for COVID related treatments, because people panicked, and everybody was not vaccinated. A slightest indication of cough and cold, people would just get panicked and go to the doctor and, start taking medication sometimes on their own. That panic would not exist. And that's the reason why I say that the growth would come down. May not be 3%, maybe 5%, 6%, but definitely not a 10% and 11% growth for next year. Coming to the nutritional segment, this segment is one which actually benefited like anything in the COVID times and has shown a robust growth of 16%, as against the normal growth of 3 to 9%. The normal growth has ranged between anywhere between 3% to 3, 7, 8, 9% in the pre-COVID times, or 3 to 9% in the pre-COVID times. A robust pickup of 16%. But now with the panic dying down, will I be seeing the same type of growth? I am not sure. So this is something that we have done for the top therapies. Again, as we are looking at it, if I just remove the filter, if I remove the filter from this point and then I look at the growth, it's not that this is going to be the average growth of the market. The entire exercise has been derived or has been worked on to help one understand what is the thought process or the different thought processes that I can apply to look at how the market will perform. It is possible that for your set of therapy areas, a different process may be required. But then for me to look at net at a top level, how the therapies will behave, this is some process that we have applied. Just a minute, I'll stop sharing this and I will go back to my presentation. Yeah. I go back to my presentation wherein I look at, what is it? Yeah. So we go to the key takeaways, because I focused only on top therapies, because top 10 therapies contribute to around 90% of the IPM. So if we get a fair idea, and majority of our players focus only on these top therapies. So if we get a fair idea about how these top therapies are going to behave, it is more than enough for us to understand how the overall market is going to be. So as the COVID hype dies down, we expect normalization of the trends in the year 2022. Some of the therapies may show a significantly higher or lower growth than the current year. Reason for the same would be unusually higher or lower sales in 2021. However, if one considers the value of the therapy in 2019 and the extrapolated value in 2022, we see a good incremental sale over 2019. The growth outlook for 2022 is based on certain assumptions of market behavior, which may have to change based on how the market evolves over the next few months. So we are just using December 21 data. Probably we need to wait and watch how the market evolves in the month of Jan, Feb, March to understand how we are going to end the year. Again, I did not assume that wave 3, though the number of cases have been significantly higher in wave 3, but the number of hospitalizations are not significant. Close to 90% of the hospital beds allocated for COVID wave 3 are vacant. Hardly any ICU admissions have been there. So I'm assuming that COVID wave 3 is not going to be that significant and impactful to impact my pharma industry significantly. Also, vaccination status, opening of pre-primary schools, opening of public places to a great extent also gives me a confidence that I should not be very much worried about the wave 3. IPM may not end with the same double-digit growth of close to 15%, which we have seen in 2021, but we may actually end up growing by somewhere around 5 to 6%. Again, I am actually putting riders of there are assumptions why I arrive at these numbers. We'll have to wait for first 3 months and see how the market is evolving. This 5 to 6% growth that I'm telling for 2022 is it's following the normal historical trend line. Possible that I may end up at 7%, possible that I may end up at 3%. But then 10% to 15% is something which looks definitely challenging. We need to wait and watch for the next 3 months. So with this, I thank you very much for spending this 1 hour with me in discussing the IPM trends or the IPM growth outlook for 2020. We are very much welcome to your suggestions and feedback, and we would definitely like to participate if any further analysis or study that you feel that can be done by us for you. So with this, I thank my session and thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great week ahead. Thank you.